Hello, hello. Welcome to today's webinar. We are so happy to see you here today. I hope you're all doing well. Ramin and I were very excited to having you here and sharing this hour with you. Thank you for joining us. Ramin, I just want to check in with you. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. It's really exciting to be here with you. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation with Lola on this very important topic. And please feel free to use the chat to send us comments or questions. We'll do our best to look through them. Lola is a little better than I am on that, but we'll both try to pay attention to the chat, and we'll go forward.
Thank you, Ramin. Thank you. So we want to thank you for being here. Erica, so nice to see you. Andrea, Christina, Deborah, so nice to see you. Dina, thank you. Erica and Jennifer, we're right here in Orange County in Fullerton. If you want to send a chat to us where you're located, we'd love to see that through the chat box. Julie, as we say hello to everybody. Kelly, thank you, Kip. Thank you, Lauren. Chip, so nice to have you here. Luisa and Maria, Nancy, thank you. Sue, Yuri, very nice, beautiful. Okay, so where are we? Let's see, where are we having locations here? Beautiful northern Wisconsin, very nice, thank you. Andrea in Santa Ana, very nice, beautiful. It's kind of hazy today in Fullerton. Philippines. Maria, thank you for joining us. I know it's really, really late there in Philippines, so you are so strong. It really shows how much you care about this topic, so welcome. It's kind of hazy here in Fullerton, and we have these beautiful, majestic St. Gabriel's Mountains. It's so funny. Ramin and I, we not only work together, we live in the same city in Fullerton, about a mile from each other, and we often walk together around this golf course that we have, and it's so really beautiful. So let's see, who else do we have here? Recognition, Chip, it's so nice. Great way to connect with individuals. Thank you very much. Obviously, leadership is really important to today's environment, especially today's environment when people are feeling stressed, where people work at home and maybe isolation, they're coming back, there's a lot of stress going on. If I'm gonna get the virus, am I gonna bring it home? So leadership in that way becomes extremely important, and this topic is very important. And you probably will notice very quickly that Ramin and I are very passionate about the topic of leadership. It really matters to us, because we as leaders look at leadership in a little different way. It's not only the task that we have to perform or the goals we have to achieve, but also the environment that we create. The environment that we create where people care about each other, where people feel safe and valued and important, and most importantly, where people can thrive. Right? And I think you are here because you don't want just people to survive, you want people to thrive. And that is, I think, what the goal of this webinar is. How do we create and how do we learn this map of relationships where people are clear on what people need? And that is what the EMC, I think, process is all about. Is done my research about for 10 years now, and I came really to the conclusion that attachment science, and I call it attachment science because I don't think it's a theory anymore. There's lots of thousands and thousands of studies that has been done on the attachment and in the relationship. And I believe that work relationships are based on attachment. And the more secure attachment you have, the better people work together. So you as leaders, I mean, we have to learn, we have to learn how to put that attachment lens on and look at interactions through that attachment glasses. So Ramin, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, certainly, I think much of what you just discussed is critical to topics of well-being and being well connected within an organization. And that's what really leadership is all about at the end, is really about creating the connections and feeding them and nurturing them and empowering people to create deeper connect with each other. Leadership to me is not just the leadership, but also the leader concept. And we're going to talk a little bit about both of those, because they're the same, but they're not the same. What I've been spending a lot of my time in the last 30 years or so, I guess, working on is really the notion of putting courage back into leadership again. It seems to be a fleeting item. Putting love into leadership, and I think it's an item that we don't talk enough about, and putting wisdom into leadership. These are the concepts that I wrestle with as I work with different leaders in different situations, seeing how we can encourage, not only encourage these elements, but also nurture them and have them be available throughout the whole organization. So we'll talk more about these things as we
I
go
love what
along,
you're
but
saying. I love what
let's
you're
get
saying.
started. It's really exciting stuff.
Yes, that's so true. And I love what you're saying. So why don't we start with our first poll, Ramin? And let's ask, I'm going to go ahead and launch this first poll. What do you think the qualities that make someone an ideal leader? So as you can see, communicative gets number one. Ramin, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think this is a critical component. So I want to actually start this conversation picking up on the information. Obviously, you all believe that many of these things are important to varying degrees. Communication is critical. It is how we connect, obviously, through understanding what other people are saying and thinking. So I want to begin this by first challenging, actually, the topic of our webinar, which is how do we make a stronger leader. So what I want to start is actually, maybe our goal should be how do we make a better leader, and that that strength is in some ways an oversold promise, because it focuses on a type of leadership that's very heroic minded. One person being the leader, running an organization, and there they are, their strength is critical. Whereas a better leader is really about better at connecting, better at dreaming, better at guiding, better at seeing new possibilities. And as you put it, Lola, better at building thriving cultures. And those are cultures that grow and learn. And those are components that all of the people in an organization have to do. So to me, the challenge is to really move away from the heroic leadership mindset to a compassionate leadership mindset, which is much more about an overall organization. So that is visible in many of the answers that we are seeing, whether it's being courageous or adaptive, creative, visionary, accessible, authentic, a concept that thanks to Brene Brown and many others is finding its way into the leadership conversations. And as expected, result driven is not as high, because leadership isn't really about results. Leadership is about connections. And through connections, all results are possible. But without connections, only very first order results become possible. So that's sort of the conversation. And thanks everyone to giving us your thoughts. And we'll talk a lot more about these, but maybe we can go to the next part, which is really talking a little bit more about management and leadership.
Yes, and I also want to add on a little bit that I love that communicative, it gets number one, because interactions are important. Interaction is what really brings people either together or pushes them apart. And I want you to, as you think about the emotional connection and as an attachment approach, I want you to think about interaction as a dance, and emotion is the music of the dance. And in order for us to change the dance where people can move in the same circle together, is what we have to change the music and the emotion. Again, once you recognize the emotion and you understand the emotion, the communication becomes so much easier to do, and it becomes coherent and clear. Share the slide that we want to talk about, the difference between management and leadership.
So why do we feel that it's important to talk about this topic? Because there is, while the two have a lot to do with each other, they're not the same. And I think a lot of the conversation that takes place, whether it's in our HR departments, whether it's in our institutional effectiveness departments, whether it's in the C-suite, the conversations get muddled a little bit when we start to mix these two things. One, really, management is really about building the capabilities of the organizations, which is, what is it there to do? What is its objective? What does it make? What does it sell? What does it do? What's its mission? And building the capabilities of the organizations and the individuals that can fulfill those. You know, the best salespeople and the best customer service people and the best manufacturing people, best engineers, best at whatever is that there is. While leadership, on the other hand, is concerned about building capacity. And capacity is this notion of what the organization is capable of doing. And if you want to use the language of mission and vision, management is really focused on the mission, while leadership is focused on the vision. And of course, you have to do your mission to be able to be around so that you can have a vision. So they're critical to each other, but they're not the same. It's another way to think about it, if you want to use another scale, is to think of what an organization does on 3 levels, or what a individual responsible or individuals responsible do at 3 levels. One level is sort of what we call the transactional. What is the organization to do? All the different things it does. And then the next level we call translational, how it takes what it does and then meets various market needs, and how it meets them, you know, either directly or through partners or what have you. And the highest level is what we call transformational. And so as we go up the scale, leadership becomes a bigger component of all of these. And then fundamentally, what we're talking about is the notion that leadership is about people's aspirations and about a state of being. And the component that both Lola and I want to get across in this webinar and a lot of the work that we do together and individually is that it's not the domain of one person or the people who are in the C-suite. It is the domain of everyone, that everyone is a leader. And that is what leadership does. Good leaders try to make more leaders, not put the focus on themselves. So that's part of what we wanted to convey in this conversation.
Ramin, I just want to
Yeah, sure, Lola.
take a moment, because I think you're saying such an important part. Everyone is a leader, and everyone can make a difference. You don't have to be the one at the top of the, you know, the table or the top of the chain. You can make a difference in terms of starting to change the dance, starting to change the interaction. And I also like what you said about the difference between vision and mission, right? That is correct. If you have a vision of yourself where you can see people working well together, where you can envision people collaborating and having each other's back, you can achieve that. It takes work. I mean, relationship is work, and creating a thriving culture is work. But when you have a map on how to get there, it is so much easier to know that you can achieve what you are envisioning. Yeah, great points, Ramin.
Excellent. And by the way, you'll see this, folks, because Lola has to slow me down. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking and the webinar will run out. So that's what makes us a good combination. She always picks up on the really important points. So, you know, we talked about these qualities both in your answer and what Lola just put up with the with the courage, adaptive, creative, authentic, vulnerable. These are concepts that I encourage you to think through. These are not just things we can just talk about in 2 minutes in a webinar. Each of these have a significant component. And then there are others which we didn't put up here, but awareness, compassion, resilience, integrity, reliability, and thoughtfulness. These are other factors. But one of the interesting things that we think about with leadership is if we put all this stuff, plus all the ones I just mentioned, there isn't a human being that has all those things. And that's what good leaders realize, is that it's not about them having all of these. It's about creating communities that include all of the people, where each person brings their own special gift and their own special place, thus creating the what I call the true leadership, which is a community. So and which is made up of individual leaders. So individual leaders make up a leadership community. And when that exists, whether you're talking about a small team in an organization or you're talking about a whole organization, then that organization has an edge that is unmatched by anyone else. And that's ultimately what we're all looking for, is being able to thrive both individually and professionally and organizationally in whatever space your business is in.
I mean, I also want to recognize, I love what you're saying in terms of we can think about those things and really apply it so more clearly. And I do want to recognize Soha. Thank you very much for your comment. She said, I agree fully. I have seen people at the lowest hierarchy and are better leaders than those at the top. Yes, it is so nice to experience and see those moments and the people who can show these characteristics and qualities that we all aspire to. And it's interesting that we feel this naturally because we are bonding mammals. We are bonding human beings. We aspire to people that bring us closer together and can pull people together. So great comment, Soha. Thank you. I'm so happy you're here.
I think that's a very important point. I think once we make the shift, and the whole conversation about management versus leadership is not to say one is better than the other. They're both necessary. But in order to be a better leader or create a better leadership environment or to encourage leadership, we do have to move away and shift from the management concepts and management thinking, which is about results, which is about control, and to one where it's not about control, but rather about relationships. It's just very simple. It's just relationships. And through strong relationships, everything else works. Now, of course, Lola is going to tell you about what it will take for relationships to be strong. What are some of the components that allow for that to work? And as we discussed, sort of slide number 4, which is really talking about the community, this is where sort of those kinds of relationships start to occur. We start to talk about engagement and trust is purely a relationship concept. Values, purpose, and vision. Now, there may be an organizational vision, but we all have worked, and you all are working in places where you could have hundreds of different vision. Every person has a different vision, and every person might have a different value system. Thus, being able to bring them together is a critical component. And of course, we work in an environment where we have a great deal of diversity of our workforce. We're still wrestling with the concepts of equity. This is 2020, and we still haven't got it, that everyone is the same and everyone is to be valued and for what they bring. It has nothing to do with where they come from, what their gender is, and what their political or other orientations are. It's a concept we continue to wrestle with, and one that we have to be aware that we're continuously wrestling with. So that's another clue that I think we'll throw in here, is that people who are leaders or want to be leaders learn about themselves first. And we're going to come back to this concept. They learn who they are, and what they're all about before they can lead anybody else. So we are struggling with these concepts. And even when we have all of the equity and the diversity, we struggle with the inclusion part. So, and then the aspirational aspect is to unleash innovation and creativity in an organization. Lola, I know these are issues very critical to you that you'd like to also add thoughts to. So let's get your version of this.
Thank you, Ramin. And I absolutely agree with you that especially like equity and diversity and inclusion, these are such an important aspect to recognize that underneath our different colors or different backgrounds, we are all human beings. We all have human needs. I'm going to stop sharing this. We all have human needs of being valued, important, matter to each other. And we want to feel that way when we work with people. And sometimes we don't recognize in the moments when we lose that connection. This is where we start to go into the path of losing that value, or maybe losing the sense of sharing the value or recognizing the value of the other person because we feel disconnected. So Ramin, you are right on point that we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with ourselves to recognize what is happening with us. How do we feel? How do we impact each other? And how we need each other in order for us to succeed.
I want to come back to one point just because it was raised. So I think Soha's point about the leadership being at any level needs to be emphasized again, because we have to realize that it does not sit at the top, it sits everywhere. You know, there's that old custodian in NASA story, right, where he was asked why he's working so late, and this is before the first manned flight to moon, and he was working very hard, very late, and they asked him, why are you working so hard and so late? He said, I'm putting a man on the moon. He didn't say, I'm helping put a man on the moon. He didn't say, I'm here because there's other people. He said, I am putting a man on the moon. That ownership, that is a point of leadership. Leaders, is really easy to spot them in an organization. A person who acts like an owner is a leader. The person who acts like a person who comes in and punches the ticket and is there to do a job and a task is a different kind. But a leader, as soon as they say, I am putting a man on the moon, that's a great sign. So thank you, Soha, for bringing that up, because we so often look for leadership in the C-suite, where it actually exists throughout the whole organization. And sometimes it's at its lowest levels. So thanks.
You know, Ramin, as you
we'll
share
go to the next
story,
thing.
Ramin, as you share the story, I have goosebumps every time I hear that. So that's a great story, and I love that. It's so inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. All right, let's go to the next our next call, which is if you think about in the past few months as a leader, what have you done with your peers or your direct reports? Go ahead and take a moment to answer this question. All right, so we have some, and here's some results. We have some excellent responses. I love that the first one is staying accessible, responsive, and engaged. Amazing. Well, I think we should just stop the webinar. I mean, that's it. But thank you. And Chip wrote, and others, owned my misgivings. That takes a lot of courage to do that. Creating a safe space for people to share emotions, 75%. Wow, that is a big deal, because especially now with people feeling more stressed and more triggered and more sensitive, to be able to do that, that's a big deal. So great job. I love it. Go ahead, Ramin.
So that's great. You guys just really made Lola very, very happy because you put accessible, responsive, and engaged at the very top. But the, other than just pointing out the obvious, none of these things have anything to do with the result of your, or the whatever the objective of your organization is. Every one of these is about relationships. Every one of these is about building relationships, such as recognizing people's care and value, just simply just saying, I really appreciate what you bring to us, to reaffirming that they have courage and strength to be dealing with the issues that they're dealing with, coming to work, whether you're underneath massive financial challenges, or dealing with the pandemic, or dealing with both, or dealing with a market share problem. These are all takes courage, and reaffirming that it's creating a great relationship, creating a safe place for people to share their emotions. How often have we gone to someone whom we saw as a leader and shared our emotion and come back extremely dissatisfied from that experience? And that is that causes broken relationships. And when the opposite happens, how strong we feel, how great we feel, how much we feel like we're part of the organization. Sharing my fears, and maybe this was one that brought some challenge for you, but to realize that we're all afraid, every one of us, including the people whom you might consider leaders or C-suite people or what have you. Everyone is afraid of some things. And we're not talking about being afraid of bees or snakes or those things. Mm-hmm. We're talking about fear of disconnection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being able to carry their responsibilities out the best they can. So being able to share our fear actually brings people in, as opposed to the other direction. So this is something we'll talk a little bit more about.
And it's also a great point. I just want to take a moment, because I love that you're spending some time about sharing fears, because fears, that is true. If we do not know how to share fears, they really become, they accumulate, and we have a way of kind of carrying those fears with us. And then it's really hard for us, because there's also fear of not being seen and not being heard and not being valued. So when we're able to express our fears in a coherent way, where people can hear us, it does bring us closer. Ramin is absolutely correct. It pulls us closer and makes the bond stronger, and makes the relationship stronger as well. Go ahead.
One last thing is, one of our participants asked a question: how do I share this information with someone who either doesn't get it or hasn't been to this thing? And we'll certainly talk about this, but I wanted to just put my 2 cents in. Simply doing these actions, or some of these actions, with that individual. Maybe you're not ready to share your fears with someone whom you feel disconnected with, but recognizing them, reaffirming their courage, being available if they come to you to talk to you about their emotions or their challenges, figuring out how to maintain your own emotional balance by understanding yourself. These are all the ways in which the kind of bond that needs to get eventually strengthened can get a life, can get some life support into it. But ultimately, the bonds will get created when we share our fears and are able to go through that. So we'll talk more about this, but I wanted to recognize one of the questions that was posed to us before
Deborah,
the
thank
webinar.
you for the question. That was
so that we can keep that in our mind, because we all struggle with that. We go to things and we say, well, how can I get this other guy to see this? And anyway, so Lola, so I want to actually now turn it over to Lola to talk a little bit about, we talked about all these qualities. We talk about emotional intelligence. We have a number of people who function in human resources and other areas. We all know about emotional intelligence and qualities of leadership, but how do we make the connections? How do we bring it to life? And so Lola, if you could take us through that.
And I love that question. What is the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional connection? Emotional intelligence is the end result. We want people to be emotionally intelligent. We want leaders to have the capacity of connecting emotionally with people, but we often don't know how to get there. Because the emotional connection process is how to be emotionally intelligent. And here's the slide is really demonstrating we have the social responsibility, we have a social capacity where people can understand, we bring the value and inclusion, diversity. We know how to do that. We know how to enhance the cooperation and collaboration. We have the relational aspect to it, where we can recognize the empathy and we know how to care and how to show our care and love for each other and create that emotional safety for people. And the bonds is the glue that holds the attachment together. So the bonds is what demonstrates the nurturance in the relationship, the strength in the relationship. So as we look at this capacity, we all get stuck. We all get stuck in moments when people are acting out, or when people are withdrawn, or when people are stressed, or where you have, the top management is pressuring for you to achieve the goals, but the direct reports are struggling with stresses on a daily basis of the daily things that they have to do. And so you see that people are acting out because this is what they do when vulnerability hits them. When they sense the disconnect, the way people act out, whether they blame or judge or maybe disengage, is because they go in what we call disconnection panic. And one of the things that what attachment says is that the biggest existential challenge for us is isolation, is be feeling alone. We are terrified of it. And we should be, because we are wired to be connected. It's not a weakness per se to say. We are terrified of emotional isolation because emotional connection is not just, the icing on the cake or something on the side of a line or something that is good to have. It is really our greatest source of energy and in life is emotional connection. It is wired into our nervous system. It is wired into our ability to function at our best. And it has a structure to it. So it is not something that we can just manipulate endlessly. It is really part of our biology. So the basic need in our relationships is desire of attachment. And that what makes leadership hard for people. I think it is because when people go into the natural way of, not natural way, but maybe habitual way, I would say, to respond to these disconnections, leaders don't know how to address it or what to do with it. So they get caught in this basic drama of sending people to learn communication skills or maybe negotiation skills instead of addressing the connection. I want to move into the key bonding questions that underneath the stress, each person is asking these basic attachment questions. And these basic attachment questions are you there for me? A-R-E. Are you accessible to me? Are you responsive to me? And are you engaged with me? And as we look at our poll, 80% of responses is, in the past few months, you have made all the efforts to stay accessible, responsive, and engaged. And maybe I want to take just a few moments to share in detail, what does that mean? Is it accessible just being there for people and, have an open door policy where people can reach you? Or is it a little bit more than that? And I think as you think about being accessible, it is really being able to access your own emotions at moments of when you're feeling stressed. Being accessible to your emotions, to recognizing what is triggering you. What is making sense where you can slow things down maybe? And maybe then you can be accessible to the other person. Maybe to recognize, oh, something changed in person's face. Maybe be tuned in. That is accessible to really access the emotional interaction, emotional wavelength that is happening as you talk to people, as you meet with people, as you work with people. Being responsive to me means, are you able to respond not to just content, how do we fix this problem, but to respond to the underlying emotional wave that is moving people into the to the decisions that they want to make or to the challenges that they are having. Are you able to respond with saying things like, you know, it makes sense why you feel upset? Or to respond in a way saying, you know, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. That must be really, really difficult for you. And staying in that emotional channel. That is what we're talking about, being emotionally responsive. This is where you can create emotional bonds and help people to regain their emotional balance. Emotionally engaged is, are you able to stay in a conversation and understand what is it people are looking for, or what is it that they really need, even though you're feeling stressed? So to really understand the perspective that other people take, and that is helps with emotional repair. When people come to you or when they're having a challenge, you don't just jump in with solutions and providing them millions of options to do, but you stay with them in their emotions so they can come up with a solution, so you can remove the blocks that is blocking them from doing their job. I mean, as you listen to this, are you accessible, responsive, and engaged? What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is how many times did I screw that up in my various lives? So it's always humbling to realize what you can do better. But I think this goes to the I think early in the conversation when we're talking about management versus leadership and we're talking about capacity building, right? This is exactly that. Is whether it's the social, relational, and the bonds that you were talking about earlier, Lola, or the accessibility and engagement that you're talking about and responsiveness that you were just talking about. These are all capacity building activities. These are capacity enhancing activities where they allow us to be able to then lift the heavier stuff, right? The heavier stuff is courage. The heavier stuff is agility. The heavier stuff is vulnerability. The heavier stuff is curiosity and moving both individual, and these cannot happen if these other capacities haven't been enhanced and nurtured. So sometimes they exist, but we don't do enough to nurture them. And that's the critical. The other aspect of this is really about the capacity within ourselves that we need to enhance. So that's really when you said we're saying we have to ask ourselves, am I really accessible? So I may be accessible, my door is open. Okay, fine, people come in and ask questions. But when they come in to ask questions, do I think about their problem? Do I think about my own problem with them? Am I able to be there for them in their space? Am I there in my own space just trying to bring them in? These are all the kinds of capacity that we need to work on. And, famous Persian poet Rumi and many other thinkers and writers, they all sort of say the same thing, which is, it says, when I was young, I was clever and I thought I could change the world. And as I got older, I became wise and I realized I can only change myself. And this notion of being able to change yourself is the ultimate key to becoming a better leader. Because the more you build your own capacity, the more you're able to do that. And I think Lola has a great example of this from a work that she has done, or a conglomeration of work in order to anonymize it. but that illustrates this. So would you tell us about that, Lola?
Yes, yes, I do like this example. And I do want to acknowledge Chip, a comment is acknowledging emotions or acknowledging how people feel does not equate agreeing with what's going on, right? So with the content. And I think to Ramin's point is to be able to stay with the person's emotional experience really starts with understanding your own experience again. An example of Sid, who's a CEO, has been really feeling anxious and distressed as going into meetings. Other than saying a quick hello or, he really tries, he has been avoiding interaction. It really has been difficult for him. He would walk into the conference room, he would be on the phone or running in and out while people walking in. He avoids eye contact when he presents information. And it really goes very quickly through meetings, disregarding people's questions or not even slowing things down for people to ask questions. As you can imagine, what kind of emotional safety do people have in the environment like that when their leader is acting like this? So it's really difficult to even raise your question and say, excuse me, I have this question, I have this concern. It's really hard for us to do that. When we do not really feel connected with people we depend on, we really become alarmed and we start to go into this means of gaining control. The way Sid is seeking connection is really using ineffective strategies to reconnect. He avoids eye contact, he goes fast, he tries not to engage into conversation, not to make a mistake, and further to disconnect. But the problem is the fact that he's avoiding them creates even more anxieties for people that he's leading. So obviously, to recognize it's not just Sid's problem, but it's the pattern that the dance that they have created in being stuck. I mean, how many of you have been stuck in a situation like that? Raise your hand. I see already several people. How many? My goodness, I think all of us, right? Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you. Excellent. That's correct. Sohat, excellent. Yeah, so true. We all have been stuck. So as Sid started to learn how to articulate his emotions, how to bring awareness to what is happening with him. His palms are getting all sweaty. His heart is beating. He feels inadequate. Maybe he feels shaky. He doesn't know how to connect with his team, so he's very worried. As soon as he started to expand his emotional arena and put words into his emotions, bringing awareness, he started to become a lot more calm. He started to greet people with a smile and warmth. He spent time in preparation for the meetings with care and love. He started to engage his team members in the breakout sessions so everybody can be involved during meetings. So this type of reaction started to change the dance in the meetings that they had, in their relationship, in their interactions, where people started to feel a lot more positive. They started to feel a lot more valued and enthusiastic in being in the meeting. And that, in a way, kind of like creates a feedback loop where people start to nurture Sid's relationship and have him feel valued and important and matter. So one of the things I think people really, really need to know is that you are so important to people that you work with, and they are important to you. You want to connect with them, and they want to connect with you. The way the connection is happening, that is when the problem occurs. This is, I think, the EMC process is so effective because it creates a roadmap for you to change the dance so people and you can reconnect and nurture your relationship. I just want to say the other day, I mean, Sid still has a lot of work to do, and he continues to improve on his understanding about relationship. But the other day, he just says, you know, Lola, I used to dread going to my team meetings. Now I love it because I feel so much more connected with my team, and I feel supported. I don't feel alone. Word aloneness is a key in the connection. So we are obsessed with making sure that people don't feel alone. So with that, I want to launch our third poll. And our third poll is, what do you think you need to work on most to be a better leader? I'm going to launch this poll and take a moment to answer that question. And I'm going to share the results. I love the answers. Oh my goodness. Communicate better is number one. That is amazing. Go ahead, Ramin.
First of all, I think what you were saying is really great. And I also want to say Sid is not alone. Once you begin to look into yourself, it's a long road. It never ends. We can always learn more and more about ourselves. So Sid has just begun the journey, and it's going to be a fun journey. And everyone, I think, has the same experiences. So these are, again, I think it was just very encouraging to see all of these responses. I want to talk about one of them in particular, which is about how to be more authentic, because I think this is one that a lot of people struggle with.
I just want to say that there's a great question that was posed by Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. Being vulnerable in front of others may be difficult for those who are not used to letting people see them or have had a wall up most of their career. What are some practical exercises in terms of baby steps someone can take to practice vulnerability, connection, and authenticity, as you were saying? So thank you, Alyssa.
So, yeah, exactly. I think, well, it's very difficult. I don't know whether I have all the answers to that either. But I think the notion of authenticity is hard to measure. So I often ask people to do a test, which is to say something about themselves, write it down. How would I describe myself to other people? I'm not talking about, that I can jump higher or run faster or what have you, but about me. What are my qualities? What are my values? What are my passions? And if you were to write those down, the test is, if you were to ask 3 groups of people, the people you work with, the people who are your friends outside of work, and the people who are your family. If you were to ask these 3 groups, to the extent that they're part of your life, would you get similar answers? And if you get similar answers, they may not be exactly the same. They probably won't be exactly the same, as my mother still sees me as a 10-year-old. So it's always hard to get her to understand that I've gone beyond that. But they're not always the same, but there should be themes. And if the themes are there, and at work you practice those themes, then you're being authentic at work. So that notion of authenticity, and if they're not there, then that is not what's happening. So the notion is to first, with all of these, and we're going to keep coming back to the same thing, which is to first practice them with yourself. Are you willing to be vulnerable to yourself? Are you willing to be communicative with yourself? And I think if you can focus on those, to the question that is asked about being vulnerable to other people, is that if you can do that first, that will be a big step in being able to have that conversation. And just like the previous poll, which asked about what have you done in the last 6 months, whatever you haven't done in those, or whatever you're really good at doing, just keep doing those, because they'll just keep building the bond that will then allow for that vulnerability to come out. But of course, as we said, leadership requires courage. So at some point, the courage is going to have to carry some of the water.
What Ramin is saying, working on yourself, is really working on yourself. But you have to know what to work on. And you have to have the language by which to work on and by which to experience all of these emotions. You have to have a roadmap. Becoming emotionally intelligent does require to know what does it mean to create safety. Yuri posed a good question. What if every time you try to communicate with a colleague, coworker, or bosses, they become angry, defensive, or emotional? Well, and that is an excellent point. When they become like that, through the EMC process, you learn how to tune into that emotion so they can feel more heard and calm. And you're going to change the dance, because the way that what they are responding to is the stress of the disconnection. And you're going to be able to learn how to do that. And that's what EMC teaches you to do that. In EMC, you have the steps to create the alliance that you need for people to slow things down and to feel safe and heard in the moments when they become overwhelmed with anger or defensiveness. You know how to create a new emotional experience. Franz Alexander, Hungarian psychologist, said change occurs through a new emotional experience. And that is what you're going to create by learning the EMC, creating reconnection, working with emotions, and most importantly, understanding attachment needs. People don't need parking spaces. They don't need certificates. What they need to know is that they matter. They are cared for, that you have their back. And you also need to know that they have your back. Think about when you feel connected, safer, valued, relieved, confident, free, hopeful, optimistic, motivated, because these are the feelings that people express at the end of EMC sessions. Not alone, energized, grateful. What do you think you can do with your team when you feel these emotions? Some of the things that people have told me: staying through obstacles, be fearless, do a lot more. Everything becomes easier to do. That is so true. Anything, Chip, is so true. Anything, including those you never thought of before. Soha, I feel I can lift them up with me. Dina said she can be more transparent, trusting employees, meet deadlines. Absolutely. All of these things we can do. We become fearless in anything that we need to do together. So becoming a better leader, and I think the stronger leader transferred to a better leader, is we can learn about the EMC. We can improve our emotional capacity. We can teach others the map of relationships. We can form stronger relationships, even with the relationships, the difficulty, or have been broken trust. We can still repair those relationships. We can lead bonding conversations where people feel much more closer, secure, and connected together. We put up a 4-week plan for you to think about. Week 1, reaffirm people's courage and strength whenever they share the emotions with you. Look for those opportunities. Maybe on week 2, acknowledge people's feelings, saying things like, that makes sense. It's hard when people are angry, but you have to focus on the emotions behind the words. Except if someone reaching out to you, and allow yourself to be authentic and vulnerable. Tune into your emotions to be emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged. And with that, I know it's 12 o'clock. My goodness, the time went so fast when you have fun. But with that, Ramin, I want to give you just the last words.
Oh, thank you, Lola. This is so fantastic, and I hope that it really resonates with our participants. My only last thing is really to honor yourself, honor the leader inside yourself, feed it, nurture it, and understand it, and through that you will change the world. You will make things happen. It's not fast and it's not easy, but you will do it. So I encourage everyone to look at the process that Lola outlined, and honor yourself. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Elisa, for your question. Thank you so much. We hope to see you next time. Thank you very much. Change the world. I love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll just stay around here a little bit if anybody would like to ask any questions, but thank you, Soha. Thank you, Lisa. Christina, thank you, Deborah. Dina, thank you, Erica, for being here. John, thank you so much. Julie, Lola, so great that you were able to join us. Luisa, Maria, thank you. Myra, thank you, Yuri. Thank you very much. Thank you, Soha. It's beautiful. Thank you for the inspiration you provide us through these webinars. Thank you. So nice. You too. You provide inspiration to us. And we're always here to help you to be a better leader. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Luisa.
Bye-bye.